So what we have is a 2010 Ford Taurus, and it's acting like I have a warped brake rotor, but I've checked the rotors in the past. I'll probably check them again, but I have a sneaking suspicion the rack and pinion is worn out, and I'll show you why. And it's strange because you get a lot of vibration in the front end of the car, and it's usually only occurs at highway speeds, and then you can get on the brakes harder and that vibration goes away. And then if you just drag your brakes at a stoplight, I don't feel any changes in brake force, which suggests to me that the rack and pinion is shot, and you can hear it if you move the wheel back and forth. So you can hear that when I shake the wheel back and forth. Okay, so before you pop these off, or before you really go at them and break them, you want to get this loose here. That way this doesn't rotate on you, so you can use the knuckle here to hold everything. So you need a 21mm open end wrench here and a 13 on the shaft to keep it from spinning. Next, I think we'll take the sway bar. We'll hit the upper one. The lower one down here looks kind of hard to get to. I'm hoping maybe we take both of those off. It'll swing up. That'll give us a bit more room in here. Next, you want to make sure the steering wheel is nice and straight as you can get it. And then I marked it there. You can see it with a yellow paint marker just for reference. And you get in there with a 10mm ratchet with a small extension on it, and you can get on the bolt and pop that off. Take note where the flat is. The flat is towards the front, and then the clearance for the locking bolt is towards the driver's side. So just take note of that because you're going to have to get that back the same way when you go to put it back together. After you get that bolt off, what we'll do next is we'll pull the supply line off. You can kind of see it right there is the bolt that gets it. You can get it from the back side. If you have the SHO version with rear wheel drive, it's probably going to be a bit harder because there's going to be a bunch of stuff in the way. This is a front wheel drive only, so I should be able to get on that pretty easily. Okay, so here's the plan. This bracket right here is held in with a 10mm bolt. You can't see it, but you can get a socket on here from above and work it out. You can see it there. So that attaches there, and I think what we'll do is we'll leave this on here, and then we'll come down and take out the actual two bolts that hold the rack in place. Now, what I did do is I took out on this side, I took out both of the bolts for the sway bar on this side, and you can get to this one from under the car, and the front side you can get from the wheel well. And then on the opposite side, on the passenger side, simply remove the front bolt and loosen the back one, but you can leave the back one in. The back one's kind of tight. It's kind of hard to get a socket wrench in there, but you can get into it. Just leave it in there. I'm going to see if we can swing the sway bar back enough to get the rack out of the way. So that worked perfectly. You take the two main bolts out of the rack with an 18 millimeter and a 15 millimeter on top. Once you do that, you can easily rotate the rack, and then you can get on the bolts that hold the main bolt that holds the line on, and then you can drain the fluid out. So pretty straightforward. You leave this on here, okay, and then you can actually use it the other end to push the sway bar up and back, and then that allows you to rotate the rack, slide it forward, and then rotate it from the clockwise from the driver's side point of view, so that the input shaft ends up down here. I tried going the other way with it. You can't. There's not enough room to get it up past the sway bar here. So if you can push it in a little bit to get it to rotate, and then you can get the sway bar out of the way, and it'll come down and out. Nothing obviously wrong that I can tell. There's no play in anything except this, which I can assume is the adjuster for preload. This is loosey. I mean, it's like, this is how tight it was. It's loose as a goose. So is that supposed to be tight? To think about that. And what keeps it from backing out? It looks like there should be like a retainer plate on here, or a cap or something. Okay, so it's the next morning. I was thinking about this last night a little bit more. As I suspected, yeah, this sets your preload on the rack and pinion, and there's a process to set that up. You have to bring this in until it touches and then back it off, and then you measure the torque out on the input shaft to make sure that it still spins freely. So there's a whole process. You can look it up on the internet. So that would suggest that there's no bushing on this side. There's probably a bushing on this side to help guide the shaft. And I suspect because this was loose and there's no cap on here, this was backing out, which allowed the whole rack to move back and forth, which probably wore out the bushing and then ultimately the seal back here. So I'm going to replace the whole thing, just to be on the safe side. Okay, so the new unit from Rock Auto, it has this plastic cap on here. You can see they even marked it. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is got the new rack out, and we want to center it. You can see this is much longer than this, so where right now the rack is shifted that way. So we gotta find the center, and what we'll do is we'll get a pair of vice grips. We'll put a rag over this so we don't scratch up the shaft real bad here. We want to make sure we can get this on, and we'll rotate it all the way until it stops, and then rotate it all the way back and count the number of turns, and then we can divide that up and find the center. Okay, so it's approximately 3 turns lock to lock, and so you divide that in half. It's 1.5 turns, which puts you with the flats here and the bolt there, which then matches what came off. We didn't turn this. We had the steering wheel straight. We brought it off, so that tells us that the rack is centered, and we will have no issues with the steering wheel being off then. Next, we want to transfer the tie rod ends from the old rack to the new rack. A good place to start, typically these are the same, not always. What we'll do is we'll count the threads here on this side, and we'll do the same on the other end, and that'll be a good starting point to make sure everything's nice and even. And we want to make sure we count the number of rotations that it takes to get this off, and we'll try to duplicate it on the new one, and we'll see how many threads are left. The key here is that you do the left side and the right side even. It doesn't matter if you have too much toe in or toe out at this point. We're trying to get it even so that the steering wheel is straight. So we want to make sure whatever we do on this side, we have to do exactly the same on the other side so that we keep things nice and even. So when we go to do our toe in and toe out adjustment, we'll have to rotate the shafts exactly the same to keep the steering wheel nice and straight. That way we don't have to go back and realign everything. Okay, so this one took 28 turns to get off. Put it back on with 28 turns. I did measure the thread length on this. This one is a bit longer, so when you count the threads here, instead of 9 threads, which were on the old one, it's a little bit more. It's actually 10 threads. But like I said, this amount that they thread here is kind of variable, so it's just a reference, really. So it's just to make sure you get it in the right ballpark. So count the number of turns, and we'll do the same thing on the other side. Okay, so when we're putting this back together, you want to make sure you don't forget these washers. Sometimes they can fall down on the subframe, you don't see them, but they go right here like this with the little tabs sticking out on each end. And what they do is these tabs align with the posts that are welded into the subframe and keep this washer from moving around during assembly. Okay, so you put it all back together, but you just don't want to slap the wheels on and go driving off. We lost a lot of fluid in that, and you can see the reservoir here is empty, and we got air in the rack itself, so we got to bleed that air out. And what we're going to do is we'll put oil in here, and it's Mercron 5 ATF, and then we'll cycle the wheel back and forth with no load on it. We haven't even started it up yet, and it's, if you cycle the wheel back and forth, you can get more air bubbles out. So even though you haven't started it, it's still draining down in there. So okay, so we started it up then, and we cycled it lock to lock, and it's kind of hard to see there, but we got more fluid, more air out. So we'll fill this up now until it's at the correct line, and then we'll just keep an eye on it, as we start driving it. So if you recall, we left the tie rod ends loose. That's fine, as long as we know that. We're going to put the tires back on and start the alignment process here. And part of that will be tightening those down, so don't forget about them. You don't want your tie rod ends coming off. Okay, so before you start an alignment, the very first thing you want to do is you want to check your pressures. Yes, is there we're at 28 psi. The Taurus one runs 32, so you want to do that on all fours just to make sure. You want to start with a good foundation. You don't want to start doing an alignment when your tire pressures might be all out of sync. So you want to try to get them as close as you can. Okay, so next thing we're going to do is we're going to back the car out of the garage, and we're going to back it out and pull it back in. We're not going to go for a drive. Remember, the tie rod ends are loose. And we're going to keep the steering wheel as straight as we possibly can, because if you don't want a crooked steering wheel when you're done with this. Okay, so next we install these angle aluminum. It could be steel. You can get these at any hardware store. And then you just drill a hole in it here, and you just run a bungee cord underneath and hook it onto something, and You know, the goal is to try to keep it up as high as you can on the tire that you can get a tape measure underneath. So we'll hook the tape measure on the other side, and then we'll come across as an example, and we'll take a measurement using this edge here for our measurement. We'll write that down. We'll figure how much toe in or toe out we have. So what you do is get yourself a piece of paper, write this stuff down. It makes it easier in the front of the car. So the front we had gotten 76 and 1/16. On the rear we got 75 and 3/16. So that's 7/8 of an inch toe out. That's quite a bit. So what we'll do then is we'll adjust the tie rods, and you have to do it evenly. If you don't do it evenly, then your wheel will be crooked. So you got to count the number of turns you do on your tie rod ends to try to move this out. And right now we're doing a rough order of magnitude, so we're not going to move the car. Well, you can move the car. You can try to roll it back and forth to take any load out from the tires sticking to the ground. But the goal is to try to get this down to a 1/16 of an inch toe in. Okay, so we did a full turn on each side, which is quite a bit, and brought us down from 14/16 down to 4/16 of toe out. So I think what we'll do with the next round is we'll go probably a quarter, maybe an eighth of a turn, and see where we land. Let's do a quarter turn, see where we land. Okay, so once you get it down to a 1/16 of an inch toe in, just snug up your lock nuts on your outer tie rods. Take it for a drive. In my case, the steering wheel is a little bit too far clockwise. So what we're going to do is we're going to take and equally adjust left and right here to move the fronts of the tires to the right to match the wheel, and the backs against the wheel, and that should help to straighten out the wheel. And at the same time, we're gonna keep checking this toe to make sure that we're not causing that to go out. Okay, so this can be expected after the first iteration of this. You know, we started with a 1/16 toe in, but we didn't really drive the car any. As soon as we take it out, things settled in. The tires are, when you drive in and out of the garage, you try to get the wheel nice and straight. And so now we have, we kind of overshot it. Now we're at like 5/16 toe in. And so in this case here, since we're trying to get the steering wheel back straight, we're going to take this right side here, and we're going to take and give it a bit more toe out, and that'll hopefully bring the wheel back straight, and then also reduce this down. So we'll see how it goes. Like I said, it's an iterative process.